I'm Will, and welcome back to Will's Digitals, your home for everything Photoshop and composite art. Today we're going to be taking a look at blending modes and how they work. Today's video will be an overview, and I'll do a longer one more in-depth in the near future. So let's get started. First of all, there's two ways to blend the pixels of two adjacent layers. One, I'm going to turn on an adjacent layer here, is to use the opacity or the fill sliders. As you can see, when I bring that down, we start to blend one layer with the layer below it. The second is to use the blending modes. But let's talk about what a blending mode is. So blending modes take pixels of one layer and blend them with pixels from another layer. As you can see in the picture, the layer stack is on the bottom. The base layer is what the layer stack looks like just under the blend mode layer. The blend mode takes the base layer, and based on the pixels in the blend mode layer, it's going to change the pixels and produce a result. Just a quick note that like any layer, you can clip a layer to the blend mode layer. If this is done, the rest of the stack is not considered during the blend. Only the layer that the blend mode layer is clipped to. Each blending mode blends the pixels using different algorithms. Now, there are 6 categories of blending modes, and we can see here that they are broken apart in our blending mode list by these categories. The categories are normal, darken, lighten, contrast, inversion, and component. You can see the complete blend modes with this drop down. It's right here. It's an unlabeled drop down, but it's normally set to normal because that's the default blend mode. So let's talk about each category. In the normal, we have 2 blend modes. Normal blend modes can only blend by using opacity and fill sliders. They don't actually modify the pixels without doing that. Normal is the default blend mode, as you can see. And we can use the opacity slider to reduce the opacity, and we'll see what's underneath. So here we go. We can bring that down. We start to see what's underneath. The lower we make the opacity percentage, the more of the image underneath shows up. If we go to 0, it's nothing but the image underneath. If we're at 100, it's nothing but the image on top. Dissolve does something similar. It's a bit more random, and it kind of looks like there's noise in the picture. It's kind of cool. As you can see, it's very random about where it's allowing the blend to happen, which gives it that noise look. Now we get into the actual blend modes that we're all thinking of. First is darken. This will use the darker colors on the blend layer to darken the resulting pixels. Lighter colors get ignored. So one benefit of the darken blending mode is they can eliminate white. If you have a picture with a white background, a black blending mode may save you an extraction. So let's look here. Notice, remember we had, there we go. We've got a gradient going from black to white, corner to corner. So if we go and let's start the darken blending mode, notice the things in this corner, it starts to modify. The things in the white corner are just what they were before. Let's look at it with colors. How's that? So here we have the darken blending mode. The black mode, remember, no matter what was up in that corner, the black square is darker, so it wins. No matter what was down in the white corner, the white square, or it's always lighter than the white square, so it wins. I'm sorry, white square was up here, wasn't it? Let's double check that. Yeah. So this, with the 2 people in it, is exactly what we see if we turn that layer off. Nothing changes. Now, varying shades of color will react differently, as we can see here. There are 5 darken blend modes. Each operates a little bit different than the next, and a lot of it as you're getting started is just trying blend modes. If you're trying to darken something and you're not quite sure, what look you're going for, try out the darken blend modes. Each one of them looks a little bit different than the other one, and they'll react different depending on what's underneath them. Next, we have the lighten blending modes. Now, these are just the opposite of the darken blending modes, in that the lighter colors on the blend layer will lighten the resulting pixels. Darker colors are ignored. So it's the same concept applies to the lighten blends as to the darken ones. If you have an object on a black background, try using a lighten blending mode and the background will go away. Again, save yourself an extraction. So let's go to the lighten blending modes. Okay, so just the opposite of what we looked at before. Notice up here in this corner we have the white, and nothing is going to be lighter than the white, so nothing from the picture underneath comes through. Over in this corner we have the black. Everything is going to be lighter than the black, so this is simply the pictures underneath, or the part of the picture that's underneath is passing through. The various other colors have various amounts of lightness in them, and so that changes what you're going to see. Next is the contrast blending modes. So we have overlay, soft light, hard light, vivid light, linear light, pen light, hard mix. Overlay and soft light seem to be the most popular. But let me explain kind of what goes on here with the contrast blending modes. They kind of combine the darken and the lighten groups. If the pixels on the blend layer are less than 50% gray, it darkens it. If it's more than 50% gray, it lightens it. So it does kind of like a contrast curve. If you've ever done that using a curves layer, where you increase you make the whites whiter and you make the darks darker. So there's much more contrast between them. Next are the inversion blending modes. Now these are based on the difference between the pixels, and you often get some wild results. For some fun, let's look at the difference blend mode. We're going to try a little experiment here. I'm going to turn that layer off. Now we're going to use Command or Control J, and we're going to make a copy of it, of our base layer, and we're going to do the difference. Now, remember we talked about that the difference blending mode is about the difference between the pixels between the two layers. There is no difference between the pixels, so they're black. The whole thing comes out black. But now watch if I move it just a little bit. Now we get something really wild. It's also a good way if you need to align stuff, is you can use a difference blending mode temporarily to do that. We can turn that back off. Go back up to our color layer. The inversion blending modes tend to be extreme and consequently aren't really used all that often, but don't let it scare you. Try to use it to make some really wild art. Now finally, we've got the component blending modes: hue, saturation, color, and luminosity. When you select a blending mode in this category, it's only modifying a single aspect of the pixel and ignoring the others. For instance, let's take our background and we're going to apply a really severe curve to it. Let's see, there we go. So we're going to bring the blacks way down and the whites way up. And we're going to turn that layer off. Now, as you can see, we've got a really wild picture. Now, if I apply a luminescence blending mode, a luminosity blending mode, it will only modify the luminance values and no others. So now, all this is really doing is controlling the brights and the darks, how bright and how dark each color is, but it's not modifying the color at all, as you can see. Now, the other layers, or the other blending modes, work the same way. If I do it with this, all we're going to do, this is a hue saturation layer. Now we're just going to be modifying the hue. Notice it doesn't get any brighter, it doesn't get any darker. We're just modifying the hue. Easy peasy. And the same thing with the color. You can see, and then finally, let's go ahead and look at, oh, we already did luminosity, so we covered them all. Here's something else kind of neat we can do with this. Let's add a black and white adjustment layer. There we go. And if we turn the blending mode now to luminosity like we did before, now we can change basically how bright each color is by moving the sliders around, by moving color sliders around, which is kind of cool. Let me grab that. There we go. So you can focus in on what you're trying to do. Just a neat little trick. Well, that's the overview of the blending modes. And I'll leave you with this little extra tip. When you're working with blending modes, please don't forget about the opacity and the fill sliders. If you try a blend mode and it's changing your work just too much, try lowering the opacity slider before you move on to another blending mode. That may get you exactly where you want to go. Well, that's going to do it for today. If you're enjoying the content, please like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.